and the newly formed feminist groups. In that Strategy for Change conference were women from a very broad range of backgrounds: unions, business, religious groups, political groups, arts, local community groups, and well-established women's organizations. Elsie had been the national president of the Business and Professional Women's Clubs, and as I recall, she was there in that capacity. She was in the thick of things. It was Elsie's custom to write out, often in green ink, recommendations and notes on what should be done. She was very focused on ensuring that the work of the organization being formed should be effective. The grand gesture was not for Elsie. She was not opposed to demonstrations and picket lines if they had a chance of succeeding, but took much more pleasure in seeing women helped, their rights enshrined, and their opportunities opened up. Pie-in-the-sky resolutions brought her to the microphone to try to bring them into some shape that would actually go through the political and legislative processes of the nation. Elsie knew those processes much better than most people, had studied them, and was interested in results in law and, even more, in regulations that would translate the ideas into action. Elsie had an astute and critical view of the legislative process. The only other person I worked with who was this knowledgeable outside Parliament was Eugene Forsey, another great, quiet reformer. Elsie was not a political party person, but got on well with individual members of Parliament in all parties. She was particularly interested in deputy ministers and women in the federal public service who had the knowledge and skills to get things done. She went out of her way to meet these women, get to know them, and be able to call them up to try to influence them. No doubt she did. In 1975, I was elected president of the National Action Committee on the Status of Women at a convention in Winnipeg. The first president, 1972 to 74, had been Laura Sabia, a charismatic leader with a particularly effective style that intimidated many people and brought joy to our hearts. The second president was Grace Hartman, a deeply influential union leader who had to resign after 1 year when she was elected national president of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, which required all her attention. Laura was a conservative. Grace was New Democratic Party, and I was a liberal, which no doubt contributed to my election. We had set out to cover the bases. We were aiming for major legislative changes. I consulted Elsie before standing for the NAC presidency. She was mildly positive, but it was clear she thought I had a lot to learn. She was right. Immediately after my being elected, Elsie was in touch to give me advice. Indeed, she was in touch nearly every day of my leadership of NAC. "Now, Lorna," she would say on the telephone, "have you got a pencil? Now, write this down." She was a fantastic mentor and friend, always with a serious point and always with a laugh. I became friends with both Elsie, her husband Bill, and Bill's daughter, and knew they had a rich life of friendships, music, engineering, and social action. But she still found time to attend NAC executive meetings and keep the minutes, write letters and articles, and give superb advice. She pushed us into action. Elsie wore leg braces and walked with great difficulty all the time I knew her, but it made no difference to her work or her ideas or her social life. She cooked at home and entertained friends. She must often have been in pain. It was that, I think, and an infection that led her to take the medicine that affected her lungs and led to her death. A family member, perhaps Helen, had called to let me know that Elsie was dying and there was nothing that could be done. It was terrible news. But what a legacy she left. Her engineering world, her writing, her work on behalf of the advancement of women, the many people she had mentored, her music, her impact on the world, and always with those West Coast jokes, manners, and diffidence. She died before she received all the honors she deserved. Crystal Sissons has brought so much of this to light, complementing the work.